Okay, welcome to topic 12. We're going to be talking about globalization and the global divide. So some of the stuff we're going to be talking about in this under this topic is the concept of globalization and really what information technology has done to kind of fuel globalization over the past couple of years. Also going to talk about some of the issues that organizations are facing as they move towards a global economy, and also talk about the digital divide and kind of how some of the different concepts around that. So the concept of globalization by itself really deals with this idea of the integration of goods, services, and culture amongst nations. So it has not been created by technology; it has been around as long as people have been around. Right. However, telecommunications and transportation technologies have accelerated globalization. So we're able to connect, easier, quicker. Speed is, kind of the essence of it. If you can talk to somebody, immediately, versus, writing a letter and having it arrive 2 months later. Obviously, a whole radical difference between those two scenarios there. So this has been growing over the years, and if anything, over the past probably last 15 or so years, things like social networks, things like e-commerce, really have really increased this integration between countries. So countries have tapped into the internet, have been leveraging the internet, and so we've been seeing this. It's really the fuel that's been driving globalization. So this idea of a global economic activity and network societies, or the idea of organized around telecommunication networks, and things are connected on a global scale. So Thomas Friedman, back in '05, he wrote a book called "The World Is Flat," where he talks about some of these concepts around globalization, and he broke it down into three broad categories of globalization. So what he calls globalization 1.0 was really centered on kind of the horsepower, wind power, steam power that countries had and were able to deploy. All right. So the time frame would be 1492, which kind of marks Columbus's first journey to the Americas, through about 1800. All right. And the outcome of this is the world shrank from being large to medium size. All right. So globalization 2.0 would be caught within the time frame 1800 to 2000, and this has been characterized by multinational companies, dynamic driving, basically the dynamic of those organizations forcing change. It's 1800 to 2000. This kind of took another measure of basically shrinking the world to small size, and what he characterizes globalization 3.0 would be from about 2000 to now. And really what we've seen is the convergence of a whole bunch of different things coming together. So PCs and fiber optic network connections and software, mobile computing, search engines. All of those things have combined together. It's an amalgamation of the capabilities of all those different things. And basically we've created what he calls a flat world platform. So you can, we used to take large organizations to do, smaller organizations and smaller people, small groups of people, or even individuals have the ability to go global. In this case, the world goes from small to tiny. Other thing about this to make note of, if you look at the ranges here, so that from globalization 1.0 was about maybe 300 years, right, 1492 to 1800. All right, so that was kind of where this first wave. Second wave was from 1800 to 2000. That's about 200 years. All right, so that's a much shorter, by 1/3. And then from 2000 to present, the amount of change that has been absorbed over that time period is as large as in many ways, in many measures, as large as all of these other ones put together. All right, so we're seeing not only a it's not only the capabilities, but the speed by which these capabilities um, appear and are enabled and are brought on board. All right. So some of the technology, some of the IT technologies we talked about, graphical user interface on PCs with personal computers, introduced both by Apple with the Macintosh and Microsoft with Windows, really has been the standard for uh, most computing. I mean, the thing is, it makes it easier for people to work with. It, graphical user interface where you're pointing and clicking versus where you have to key everything in, kind of the old systems. In addition, internet infrastructure. A lot of this stuff, the internet itself, what we think of as the internet, which is really the World Wide Web running on the internet, really came into being 30 years ago. Right? Tim Berners-Lee uh, from England developed what he called the World Wide Web, which was built on top of the internet. What we see as the internet is really the web. All right, but that really was not used, commercially until like 91, 92. All right, so from that period, we've seen this explosive growth. You know, so internet, so a lot of the internet infrastructure started being built out during the dot-com boom. All right, but it's been, it continues to have grown. And then finally, this idea of using software systems to automate and integrate business processes. Together, all this stuff creates what we would call a platform for global collaboration, right? And it continues to evolve. It continues to move, even as we speak. Some of the stuff we're seeing now that's contributed to it, open source. One of the things that's interesting, if you look at organizations like Google and Facebook, uh, and actually in Amazon, those are major technology. They have, a lot of their stuff is built on open source systems. Right? They actually leveraged, you know, the capabilities of things like Linux and the technologies that we see in open source systems to run their stuff. And then mobile technologies, so this is, if anything, the mobile technologies double this stuff down even more. So now we've gone from one computer in a company to a computer on every desk, to a computer in every home, to a computer in every pocket. And we've seen each measure of this is contributes to like this expansive growth. So this is really from a business perspective. This is seen as a business opportunity. Technology, it supports the demands of business, international business. It gives companies the ability to locate expertise and access you know labor pools globally. So you can extend your operations. So instead of having to bring material to a location, you can actually effectively run operations out of a particular, at a particular site and coordinate on a global basis, different operations. Plus, you can run 24 by 7 by 365. Right? What the result is, it turns it into larger markets for products and services. However, you don't get this for nothing. Right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff as organizations have moved into this global world. What happens is you see a bunch of stuff. So one of the things we see, infrastructure differences. Not the internet is not evenly distributed all over the planet, right? So you see a lot more a lot more capabilities have been built out in major in industrialized companies, not maybe to the same degree in smaller companies. All right. The other thing companies have discovered that labor laws and regulations differ country to country. As every country you go to will have its own rules and regulations, which have to be understood and adhered to. All right. In addition, legal restrictions, and also other things, language, customs, preferences. Every place has its own particular dynamic, which has to be taken into consideration. And then finally, international shipping. You know, we've seen organizations, companies now are working on, global supply chains. So what this means is, the operations are built from, you know, operations that are in different or coordinated activities in different countries, on a global basis. All right, not easy to do. I mean, so even with technology, makes it capable of doing it, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to coordinate this and to manage this on an ongoing basis. So the concept of what we call a digital divide, it to the degree that we talk about different the implementation of the internet, it differs by country, but at the same token within even within countries, we have the haves and we have the have-nots. All right. So and this is what we refer to as the global as a digital divide. So it can occur between countries, regions, and neighborhoods. So not everybody has same access. One of the things that the ACM Council Code of Ethics started talking about, was this idea of a digital divide that really prevents, you know, people who maybe might be more disadvantaged, so low-income households or seniors or single-parent children or people in rural areas, really from having adequate access. All right, so this has been, this is a problem not only overseas but also here in this country. Depending upon where you're at in the country, the quality of your and the capabilities of your network access, may be limited. All right? So the other thing about this is it's not simply providing the internet access to the internet. So just getting you connectivity, yeah, get you in the game, but it's not the only thing. So, for example, there's been an effort, actually a global effort. I think this was developed, partly through the United Nations around what they call the OLPC, One Laptop Per Child mission. So the idea of in developing countries, empower children, developing by providing them the capability of learning by one connected laptop to every school-age child. So the design of this was it's inexpensive but rugged. Um, you know, it builds a network, basically a mesh network. So the idea is you have a whole bunch of machines that basically operate, what they say, on a peer-to-peer basis, which kind of create like an instant network. And then that runs on a minimal power platform for practicality in remote areas where you don't have a lot of electricity. All right. The thing about this, it runs into this with any, and this is not just to this particular project, but anything. The issues they run into within globalization are things around cultures, the adaptation of cultures, uh, corruption, and competition. So all of these things are things that make this thing challenging. It doesn't mean you don't try it, but it also, you know, being practical around, the implementation might not be as easy as hoped. So, a new perspective on a digital divide. So, we were talking about kind of, what are the different elements of it. So, the first thing we see is, and this is from a study back in 2006, Jay Nielsen, three stages. So, the first one is what they call the economic divide. So that, people can afford access, can afford a computer, can afford internet access, and others cannot. Right? That's our first step. The second one is usability. So usability means it's the complications. You get something and you have to learn how to use it to be effective. And if it's so complicated you can't figure it out, then that becomes a barrier. All right, and then the third the third stage is really once you get the basic, once you have the technology, once you get through the usability, then really what they call the empowerment, which is basically using it, basically being able to tap into the internet, not only tapping into the internet, but being able to contribute into the internet and be able to really leverage it to best advantage. Right? So it's a combination of you know, moving on this is not just simply just giving somebody a computer, but also kind of enable it and then leveraging it. And finally, just to wrap this up, um, this idea of globalization and privacy. So what we've seen is, this massive explosion. There's no other way to really describe it. Technology on a global basis. It's had an impact in a lot of different ways. Some of which have been or were unexpected. All right. So as we've been able to scale systems and networks up, the ability to generate and capture large amounts of data can be and then furthermore be able to not only just capture it but analyze um, large amounts of personal data. We're finding some amazing things. You can interpolate. Taking a lot of this information, being able to pull enough information from a whole bunch of different sources. They found you can actually find lots of information, more so than you would ever imagine. Right. And so there's a whole question around personal privacy. And the key concerns now really lie with organizations that really have built a lot of this stuff. So these are like the big, not limited to, but obviously the big players right now: Google, Facebook, Amazon. You can throw Twitter in there, other social networks, Instagram. Um, Everybody. So there's a lot of stuff. So when you're conducting business across the internet, there's bits of information. And when you're doing it on phones, in addition, with the other bit of information you can capture from a phone is location. So it tracks your location, so you can actually follow someone around. There was a story recently about Google Chrome, basically being, doing a study being done on that, and basically, Google Chrome discovered that, as the analyzed Chrome, it basically monitors a bunch of information. All right, so this has really become this has become sort of now a real concern. How this is going to um, play out is to be determined. All right, there's a lot of issues in over for now. A lot of these companies, for example, Google in particular, has been really challenged very seriously over in Europe because Europe has a different approach to privacy. They have an opt-in strategy, which basically says uh, people cannot access your personal data unless you explicitly give them permission to opt in, right? Which is the opposite of the United States. The United States is, you basically or have presumed permission to access data, unless you opt out. All right, so that's kind of so it's a key difference here. So this is a challenge. Privacy has emerged. It's a key concern, and this is probably going to be the thing we're going to be seeing. I would say for the next 5 to 10 years, this whole idea of privacy, and how much information can an organization gather on you, and how can they use it, and things of that nature. So, all right. So that is it for this particular topic.